Good morning, everyone. This is Liz with the WCCOA. We are here with Lauren Stewart today. She is a naturalist through ODNR. She is at Maumee Bay State Park, and she is going to be giving us a guided tour of the boardwalk today. Thank you so much, Lauren.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. So, if you haven't been to Maumee Bay State Park before, we are a little bit east of Toledo, about 10 miles east of Toledo, and we have one of the longest boardwalks within the state of Ohio. Our boardwalk is just about 2 miles long. The whole thing is boardwalk, which is awesome. We have a short loop, which is a 1/4 mile, and a long loop, which is a mile. And if you do everything together, it ends up being 2 miles. Now, what's really neat about this park is our location. So our northern border of the park is fabulous Lake Erie. But on the south side of the park, where I'm actually located now, is the Lake Erie Marsh and some remnants of the Great Black Swamp. So this area, so basically Lake Erie actually used to be a lot bigger. There's a lot of different glacial lakes throughout many eras of time, with the most recent glacial lake being called Glacial Lake Warren. And Lake Warren used to be a lot bigger. And essentially, Lake Warren almost went all the way to Fort Wayne and was a lot further south towards like Bowling Green. And when Lake Warren receded and we kind of got to where current Lake Erie was, it left a whole bunch of clay deposits. And which is what you can really find in Northwest Ohio. We have a ton of clay soil. It's basically an old glacial lake bed. And clay is really rich in nutrients, but it isn't great at letting water go through it. There's not a lot of, so the particles of clay are very small and they sit very tightly together. And so water can't really drain through it like, say, sand. And what's significant about sand is because to the west of this area and to a little bit of south of us, we have what is called the Oak Opening region. And the Oak Opening region was defined by essentially what was the old beach areas of Glacial Lake Warren. So pretty much we are almost in a lake of clay surrounded by a sandy beach. So as we go further west, we go to clay, and all of a sudden you're getting sand. And that is our old beachfront for Glacial Lake Warren. But where I'm at currently, clay. And because clay doesn't drain and we don't have a lake here currently, where the glacial bed was, we get a swamp out of it. So this area that we're located in which the boardwalk does go partially through, is the historic Great Black Swamp. And the Great Black Swamp was aptly named. The swamp itself had a lot of trees. The soil was very dark. And the trees were so dense, it would look like even at noon, it would look like it was getting towards dusk. So it was one of the last places in Ohio to be settled. And the reason why is a swamp is not the easiest place to live. So I'm going to show you a little bit of our nature center here and what we have to deal. So we actually had some historic flooding basically the day before Memorial Day weekend. And we had 2.5 feet of water over the boardwalk. So I'm outside the front of the nature center here. We are built up. The nature center itself is about 4 feet off of quote unquote the ground here. You can I'm standing on the boardwalk now and I'm going to give you an idea. Gotta switch my camera around. Gotta figure out how to do that. Oh, there we go. So you can kind of see that we're kind of built on stilts. And the reason for that is because this area itself is prone to flooding. Because Lake Erie, when she goes over her bounds, what her normal is when we're in floods because of seiches, which are caused by winds, basically we end up having Lake Erie in the marsh. And last Friday or 2 Fridays ago, we had 2.5 feet of water over our boardwalk. So we had a lot of significant flooding here. And that is a kind of a phenomenon here that we have in Lake Erie, because Lake Erie is so shallow, we're really affected by winds. And essentially we had sustained and high northeast winds that increased the water level on the western basin of Lake Erie. Basically, we stole all the water from the Cleveland, New York area and shoved it all over on this side, we had about almost 10 feet of extra water on this side, which meant we had 2.5 feet of water over here by the nature center itself. So we had a lot of water back here. And that is typical of the coastal regions of Lake Erie. So the Great Black Swamp, usually we're at the very edge of it. It started to be truly swampy a little bit farther south of the lake itself, because most trees cannot be sustained when they're constantly in water. Marshes tend to have higher amounts of water that can't sustain trees as easily. So you're getting more of the aquatic reeds, the aquatic grasses. And as you go farther south, you're getting those trees. And the Great Black Swamp, filled with those trees, a lot of habitat to a lot of megafauna. And like I mentioned earlier, Lake Erie, the Great Black Swamp by Lake Erie was one of the last places settled in Ohio, because you had to deal with things like bears, wolves, mountain lions, wolverines. So there were some things that would cause pause. There's some predators here that they were a little bit harder to deal with, especially in the 17 and 1800s. But the biggest one were actually the mosquitoes. The mosquitoes carried malaria and killed many, many, many of the settlers. So the little small mosquitoes actually one of the most dangerous animals that the settlers in the area could encounter. Now, besides that, when you were trying, I'll show you kind of an example of what it may have looked like when they're trying to settle in the early 1800s. A lot of Ohio was settled. However, this area was pretty much open land. The land was basically free because nobody wanted to live there because it was so difficult to settle it, because you're dealing with things that look like this. So trying to put a house in the middle of a marsh / swamp, you have all these trees, you have water to deal with, and you have bears and lions and wolves all to contend with as well. And basically, it wasn't until Toledo became a true city where they could get supplies a lot easier, and the increase in ditch digging technology did this area truly become settled and kind of look like what now it does today. You can see a historic Great Black Swamp cabin at Pearson Metro Park, the Joe Lynn cabin. Essentially, the first settlers in that area, the Joe Lynn family, didn't even last a year. They came from Germany. Malaria or disease took them out. Then some more of their family came and were finally able to settle. But the marsh itself and the Great Black Swamp itself was a very, very difficult place to be. However, it was kind of the last stronghold for a lot of our wildlife. And we can still kind of see that wildlife here today as well. So I'm looking to see if I can find any of my turtles out, but it doesn't seem like they want to cooperate. Right now, you may see all this green. Look like, oh, that's a lot of algae. That water is gross. Actually, we have two different plants back in here. Let's see if I can zoom in. Two different plants back in there. Now, the lighter green stuff is actually called duckweed. Duckweed is the smallest blooming vascular plant. They actually have two little individual leaves, a tiny root system, and between the two leaves, there's a flower when they're in blooming season. And then we have an aquatic, which almost looks like a miniature lily pad. I don't have the technical name for that, but this is all aquatic vegetation. This is actually not algae at all. You can see some trees and bushes are able to grow just fine. These plants right here is the button bush, really important to our migrating bird species, provide places for insects to hide. But you may look out and see that you're not seeing a whole bunch of green except in the water. Unfortunately, because Lake Erie this area is permeable to the Lake Erie is permeable to the marsh, and Lake Erie's also been at historic highs. We have had basically the marsh be flooded for about 5 years straight. In a normal marsh system, you'll see flooding in the spring, and it dries out in the summer and fall, and then maybe you'll get some more flooding before the winter kicks in. But we've had water in this marsh for over 5 years. And unfortunately, our maple trees just couldn't take it anymore. So we have a lot of now woodpecker habitat, but we have lost, unfortunately, quite a few of our trees. Now, we do still have some trees that are able to handle the extra water. The smaller scrubby plants are called buttonbush, like I mentioned earlier. And the bigger trees in the background are going to be black willow. The black willows can take the being completely saturated by water. So can the buttonbush. Unfortunately, our silver and our red maples could not. Some other animals that you might find and some other plants that you might find in this region, turtles. Turtles are a big one, as well as frogs. Now, this aquatic vegetation is awesome for our frogs. It gives them a place to hide and a place to be camouflaged because we have a lot of natural predators for the frogs here, ranging from snakes to birds to raccoons. We have the great blue heron and the American egret are two of the most common ones that we'll see here feeding on the frogs in the park. Water snakes in particular love to eat frogs, but the aquatic vegetation gives the frogs a lot of cover and helps them blend in. And oh, we actually have an American egret hunting right now. That white bird in the middle of the picture, that's our American egret there. Looking for frogs. We have 3 different species of frog that are very common in this area. You're going to find things from the leopard frog to the bullfrog, all the way through to the green frog. Those are our 3 most common species that you'll find. And with that, we can also see some evidence that we have woodpeckers going away at these trees. You'll see holes. Now, these trees will basically be essentially areas for the insects to overwinter, and the woodpeckers are absolutely going to take advantage of that. Gives them plenty of food to have. We actually have had an increase in our red-headed woodpeckers nesting in this region because basically there's been more cavities available for them because we have more dead trees. So even though it's sad to see the trees die, it's all part of the natural cycle that we can, other animals will use the dead trees and they'll all go back through, which is great. Now, this region is also known for not just having a lot of water and having a lot of amphibians and reptiles, birds. Birds are the big one. We have the migrating warblers. Oh, and a red-winged blackbird is chasing one of those American egrets. We have the migrating warblers. Quite a few of them nest in this region. We'll be hearing, you might be able to hear it in the background. It goes, sweet, 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 sweet. That is the yellow warbler. That's going to be the most common nesting warbler in this region. And they're well named. They're all yellow. They're pretty unmistakable. They're not quite that highlighter yellow of like the American goldfinch. However, they are very bright, very distinctive because of their yellow color, which is great. We also have we have 36 species of warbler that travel through this area, with about 25 of them that nest in Ohio and in this region. One that would be unique to Maumee Bay nesting would be the prothonotary warbler. They are the only warbler that nests in cavities. They also nest in swamps. So they're known as a swamp candle, and you can find them nesting here at Maumee Bay State Park, which is a wonderful sight to see. So our warbler migration, our big migration push is usually the 1st and 2nd week of May, but the breeders are going to stay here through the summer as well, which is always lovely to have. Now, a big question we get asked, are there any venomous snakes? You do see a lot of snakes, especially if you're having really cool mornings and then the sun comes out, they're all out in the sun trying to warm up. By far the most common snake you're going to see is the northern water snake, non-venomous. They eat fish and frogs, basically. Then the eastern garter snake, again, non-venomous. And the one that's often mistaken for a venomous snake is the eastern rock snake. Completely non-venomous, only found in 5 counties in northwestern Ohio and 4 counties in southeastern Michigan and nowhere else in the world. So we're very, very fortunate to have that snake. It has a coppery head, which people tend to go, oh, that's a copperhead. No, not a copperhead. It just, they kind of look a little bit similar. Non-venomous constrictor feeding on like mice, rats, and birds as well. So those are some of the most common reptiles you'll see here in terms of snakes. We have a threatened species of turtle called the blanding turtle that is found here. Oh, there's a red-headed woodpecker calling. We have the blandings turtle, the snapping turtle, the common snapper, as well as the painted. Those are all going to be 3 common turtles to this region. And we have plenty of water for our turtles and our frogs as well. But besides the cold-blooded creatures, we also do have some mammals. We have muskrat, which are often found in the water, and I'm trying to find a good lodge for you, but unfortunately, because of all the flooding, they kind of got washed away. Muskrat look like miniature beaver. So a lot of people mistake muskrat for beaver. Beavers are huge. A lot of people underestimate how big beavers really are. Beavers weigh about 40 pounds. So you're looking like a medium-sized dog, where a muskrat is like the size of a football. So there's a pretty big disparity in size for them. And it also has to do with what they eat. So muskrat are going to feed on aquatic vegetation. Beaver are actually going to be going after those trees, and they're getting the inner cambium layer. So muskrat can't take down a tree. Beaver absolutely can and will take down trees. But we do have both in our park. The beavers are just more on the eastern side, closest to the mallard hunting club. So muskrat, one of our mammals here, often found in the water. They're active year-round, so they don't hibernate or anything like that. So even in the wintertime, you'll see them either under the ice or on top of the ice. They can tolerate super cold water. I would not want to be in the water that they're swimming in the wintertime. So muskrats are one common one. We also have red foxes, coyotes, and our most common mammal that is seen, the raccoon. Raccoons like to live in riparian areas, so they usually like to live around water. They are opportunistic omnivores. Basically, it means they're garbage disposals. They'll eat anything and practically everything. They do carry some diseases that can affect humans. They're prone to have a parasite that can cause blindness in humans. They can carry rabies, and they carry canine distemper. So that's one of the big reasons why we do not allow dogs on the boardwalk. Our raccoon population has canine distemper. It is naturally occurring. Also, there's nowhere for the dogs to go to the bathroom except on the boardwalk. But the big one is just we don't want the dogs getting exposed to canine distemper because it is fatal to dogs. So, and that's also a big thing is why you want to remember that wild animals are wild. You don't need to feed them. There's plenty of food out here, I assure you, for our raccoons to eat. So we really have to remind people that even though they're cute, they may, be curious about what you're doing. You don't want to feed them, and you don't want to encourage the human contact because they can make us sick. We can also make them sick, and you don't want to be exposed to potential diseases. So raccoons, one of the most common mammals that you'll see. They're mostly going to be seen in the evening or at night. However, during breeding season for all mammals, the babies do not know when to sleep. They don't know when to wake up. They don't know, hey, we're supposed to be nocturnal. They're up all the time, just like human babies. So in the breeding season, we might see nocturnal animals out during the day. That's because their babies are up and hungry and they have to look for food. Mom has to be up when the babies are up. So you may see some nocturnal animals such as raccoons, coyotes, or skunks or foxes during the day. But if it's during breeding season, you're in the clear. It's not truly a sign of rabies like it would be any other time of year. So that's just something to consider. Skunks are also very prevalent in this region, as well as just Northwest Ohio itself. I think they're cute. They're important insectivores. However, they are a disease vector for rabies. They are a vector for rabies, as well as they have a lovely dispense mechanism that we're not quite a fan of. That spray is very, very effective. Fun fact about skunks, they can do 2 different types of spray. They can do a misting spray if you're too far away, or if you're in 15 feet. They can do a targeted water gun style spray. They like to aim for your eyes. It can cause temporary blindness. So that is just something to be aware, especially if you're out within the park, that you may encounter skunk. The boardwalk, you're typically okay because you're above the ground and usually it's flooded back here, so the skunks really aren't a fan of swimming. But just as a note, throughout the rest of the park, we absolutely do have skunks, and I have seen plenty of them. So that is just something to consider. Another lesser seen mammal that we have here, which is a really cool one, is called the mink, the American mink. They're in the weasel family. They kind of look like a really long, stretched out squirrel. They are voracious predators. They are very small. They're about the size of an eastern fox squirrel, so just like the typical squirrel you'll see at breeders, not that size. But they can hunt prey as big as rabbits, like cottontail rabbits. So basically something that's larger than them. So that they're also very neat to see. They like to hunt along the edges of Lake Erie here. They like to keep in the rocks, looking for snakes, frogs, crayfish, even small mammals like mice. But they're opportunistic. If they come across a rabbit, they will absolutely try to go for it as well. So we do have them here. They're not as commonly seen. They're pretty secretive, and they're also smaller, but they are here in this region. We are also very excited because we have a couple of really neat nesting animals, birds in particular. We have a pair of bald eagles that have had a successful nest, and they've had 3 eaglets that are getting ready to fledge. They are, you can actually see them from the big loop on the eastern side of the park, so that you can see their big nest from the boardwalk, which is awesome. And we've been seeing mom and dad a lot flying overhead. And the most exciting news we have for the park itself is we have endangered nesting birds that have not nested in Ohio in over 80 years, the piping plover. They are at the north side of our inland lake, and they have 4 eggs. They'll leave their first egg on Memorial Day. So we're super excited. Their names are Nish and Nellie. And Nish, the male, came from Chicago, and he was hatched last year. And then Nellie, the female, also was hatched last year, and she came from Pennsylvania. So we have an East Coast, West Coast romance going on right in the middle, this part of Lake Erie. So we're really excited to have those birds. The Great Lakes population is federally endangered, and it's also state endangered. So they are protected both federally and on the state level. We have nest monitors from U.S. Fish and Wildlife. We have multiple agencies monitoring these birds, and as well as the area is blocked off from the public. So we're fortunate they decided to not nest in the middle of the swim beach where they initially their courtship behavior, and they picked the north side of the inland lake, which is not a swim beach access. So we were grateful that they chose that, but we're very excited and hope they have a successful nest. They are projected to hatch. The eggs are about 4th of July weekend. So it'll be busy, not only for birds as well. So we're super excited. Did you guys have any questions about the natural history of this area or any other animals themselves that you can see here?